Welcome to the Data Faces podcast, where we explore the real-world impact of AI, data science, and analytics with some of the brightest minds in the field. I'm David Sweener, your host for today's conversation. Today, we're thrilled to have Kjell Carlsson, head of AI strategy at Domino Data Lab. Kjell's been in this business for quite a while now. He has a ton of experience, and he brings a unique perspective on AI, combining his expertise in governance, strategy, and really he has a knack for separating hype from reality. So, Kjell, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So today we're going to talk a little bit about, the biggest questions in AI today. What's AI going to look like in 2025? How do we govern it responsibly? And, what's real and what's not? And what's all the buzz about agentic AI? So, Kjell, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and what's going on over at Domino?
Sure thing. Yeah, so I have one of the best jobs in the world. I get to spend most of my time talking to people about artificial intelligence and machine learning, talking with very advanced teams about what it is that they're doing, the challenges that they're facing, the successes that they're having, and going in and getting attention for their best practices, their successes. But I also get to be a little bit of a therapist. It's also don't worry, you're not alone on this. This is how other folks are tackling this, and it will get better as long as you keep at it and go in and separate what's real from what's not real.
All right. Well, let's it's time flew this year, and next year, so less than 2 weeks away. I'm looking at my calendar right here. That's I don't know where the time went, but what are the predictions for AI in for 2025? What trends are overhyped or under discussed? What's 2025 going to usher in for us?
Yeah, well, I have to apologize. My biggest prediction for 2025 is actually my main prediction for 2024, which was that, like 90% of Gen AI projects are going to fail to deliver transformative value. So, I mean, some of them will be successful. It's just not transformative. They are improvements. They delivered what they were supposed to, but they're not changing the business as we know it. And unfortunately, we're really set up for the exact same situation in 2025. It's not that, Gen AI isn't ready, that the technology isn't mature enough. It's that our organizations are not mature enough, and we don't have the people, process, and above all, technological capabilities to really go in and properly identify, design, develop, and deploy, and certainly govern these Gen AI applications in a way that really moves the needle for the organization. So it's not to say, don't invest in Gen AI. No, you'd be crazy. You have to. But it is really a lot harder than folks are thinking. And a lot of the beliefs in magic bullets that, we were just going to go in and put these LLMs in the hands of end users and we were going to spark a productivity revolution. It's like, well, there are certain areas, but even things like for code generation, it hasn't been a slam dunk. There was a productivity improvement. In some places there wasn't. And in many instances, it's kind of plateaued. So really organizations need to be really moving beyond we just got co-pilots embedded in our business applications, or we, have a hosted version of a private instance of an LLM, and really take the next step into, okay, well, what are the Gen AI products and solutions that we need to build that are custom for our business and that will really move the needle for our business.
So it's not as plug and play as one might think. Is that what I'm hearing, Kjell? And is it is it a case of like just you have a hammer and everything becomes a nail? It's like we have to use this, and is it a new way of doing things for companies, or they just they're not thinking through the use cases, or is it just the complexity of deploying something across an enterprise?
Well, it's a little bit of all of the above, but the thing that I notice from the organizations that I've spoken to where they have achieved incredible success. So thinking of Bolt, the European ride-sharing company, and where they are able to use LLMs to offload some giant portion of all of their customer chats. Okay. Well, it's because they were already an advanced ML and data science organization to begin with. They had plenty of experience creating data and machine learning products. They had the teams, they had the platforms, and were able to build on that when LLMs came on the scene and execute that really, really quickly. Or thinking about various biopharma companies, probably talking to 6 so far that are leveraging generative AI for developing faster protein-based treatments. And again, we're already very sophisticated data science teams with ML engineering and ML ops capabilities. And this became this new additional tool in their toolbox that really unlocked the world of unstructured data and allowed them to do new things that they couldn't do before. But it was all building on what they already had. So yes, you can go in and get very generic improvements. So, I mean, think of this as like internet search, right? Internet search comes along and everybody becomes a lot more productive with internet search.
Sure.
But your business doesn't sort of automatically transform because everybody in your organization is using Google all of a sudden. Right? In order to be able to use that technology meaningfully, you need to go in and do all of that hard work to get your enterprise search to work. And that's how many organizations today are happy with where they are on enterprise search.
They're all terrible as far as I can tell. Can't find anything around here.
Yeah, and it's part of it's a technology problem, but a lot of it is a people and process and incentive problem, and that doesn't go away because we have a new tool, no matter how powerful that tool is. And don't get me wrong, it is incredibly powerful. Gen AI and transformer models are incredibly powerful. They're just not usually in the way that people think, and not in and it doesn't mean that they're easy to use with your data and your systems. Unfortunately, wish it was different.
All right. So on the prediction, Kjell, how about jobs? Am I going to have? Is it going to take my job? Curious about your prognostication on that one.
Yes, and so it certainly will be the case that a lot of layoffs will be blamed on AI. They already have been. There are a couple of big tech companies who are saying that the tens of thousands of people that they've laid off are because, well, they don't need them because of what they're doing on AI. And at least in developed countries, I think almost all of these are lies. They're almost there. They are a way of calming down existing customers who are worried, if you're firing all these people, what's going to happen to your support for me? Or for investors, if you're firing all these people, where is growth going to come from? Or boards? Well, AI becomes the convenient scapegoat in those cases. A different story when it comes to developing countries. If you are in the outsourced customer service center industry in the Philippines, or in back office, back office automation, quote unquote automation. A lot of it is done very manually. This could be terrible. This could be devastating for local economies. It probably is already happening. But if you're in the US, if you're in Europe, most of those jobs had already been outsourced or automated in some fashion. So, I mean, there are certain professions that are likely going to be very different. I mean, this is not the time to go in and plan for that career as a voice actor. And if you are a marketing content writer, I don't hear about that necessarily layoffs, but a lot of, well, we're just not backfilling these roles, and we're not increasing hiring in the same way that we want. Or occasionally it's you're not getting the budget in marketing that you are because somebody has decided that you should be more productive with AI. So it's not to say that there aren't jobs that are impacted, but it's really small in the developed world, at least in 2025. If the technology dramatically changes, who knows in 2 to 3 years? But I'm skeptical, because we've been talking about that, this would go in and change jobs even before Gen AI came about. Remember 2017, 2018, when Uber was going out and saying that, they were going to be replacing everybody with fleets of robo-taxis. And yeah, I'm sure there are some robo-taxis over in a couple of places. Minor detail that in actuality there are humans in remote centers who are actually taking control of these pretty regularly. So
okay,
I'll believe it when I see more evidence of it.
You're an optimist, Kjell. I like this. It's I think on the content side, I think is productivity the right measure of a person? I think there's And you're right. I don't think they're going to hire as many people, but that just puts the people doing the job. They have to do a lot more task switching, and I think it's going to people are going to get burnt out. I think. I don't know. This is just this. I think something I've noticed. And then with all these ways of communicating, I'd love to get your perspective on this. There's like, we got Slack, we got email, we got text now. And when I try to find something in an organization, I can't find it because I don't know if it's in my Slack, if it's in my email, if it's in my text messages. It's a nightmare.
Yeah, I mean, we can make a lot of that better with Gen AI, right? We can go in and create assistance and search functionality that can now go and look across all of these different types of content much more effectively, distill it, help us find it, help us use it than ever before. But just because we can doesn't mean we're going to. And wouldn't it be nice if there were COTS solutions out there from, like, say, I don't know, the folks who are providing most of our business applications, and if wouldn't it be nice if they were to embed Gen AI effectively in those and solve that for us? They haven't so far, and there's not a whole lot in their incentives really to go in and do that. And there's a lot to suggest that when it comes to Gen AI in particular, that so much of the value is in your own data, in the integration with your own systems, and the alignment with your processes, that I'm just not really seeing a whole lot of off-the-shelf solutions for Gen AI, even for the ones that should be the most generic and common across organizations. Okay. And so there's not a whole lot of optimism around that there's going to be more for you to buy for Gen AI that you can just plug and play. It's more, okay, we seem to be collecting more battle scars and more suggestions that this is going to be even more of something that, like all of the rest of machine learning, that you need to actually build up your own capabilities around. Sadly.
Okay. All right. Well, let's talk about one more prediction. Let's talk about AI engineering. Is this going to become mainstream?
Oh, well, I mean, it's already been the case that the AI engineer job profile is like one of the hottest new titles on LinkedIn. Now, obviously, there's a lot of confusion about what is an AI engineer? Is this just an ML engineer that we've rebranded? And is AI engineering just ML engineering, or is this entirely different? Most people have been approaching it from the point of view that, no, this is entirely different. This is just Gen AI, and this is all about leveraging your LLM effectively, and it's an entirely different way of working. Now, that is true when you start with them, in the experimentation phase. But over and over again, I'm seeing folks realize that, well, actually, it's the LLM, when you're looking, is just a small component to this. It's about, okay, well, at the beginning, it's now I need glue code in the beginning of it to manage my prompts. I need glue code at the end of it in order to add guardrails. Okay. And I need glue code in order to integrate with my production systems and my business rules engines that interact with those. And now I also need to figure out how I'm going to be working with my my vector stores and getting information from those. And now I need to be doing a lot more on the data and feature engineering that's feeding those vector stores. And now that I look at it, actually, this single LLM is much less effective than using multiple LLMs in tandem. And almost always, it's far more effective to decompose the problem and have a bunch of predictive ML models in this pipeline as part of this. And before you know it, this is, well, ML engineering with a couple of bespoke smaller components for working with and managing generative AI models. I guess, sorry, that was a long-winded way of saying there's similarities, but it is different. It is an evolution. It's not the same thing, but it is. But their foundations are all the same.
So we have AI engineers, we have ML engineers. Are data scientists dead? Is that like, or do I just need to go update my profile to say ML or AI engineer?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one because the data science moniker was always unclear, right? That was the power and weakness of the term data scientist was, well, we know we need somebody smart who can figure out a whole range of different technologies and, understand the business problem and deal with our messy data and things. What is that role, right? It's not it's not an applied statistician. It's not is it a data miner? Is it a business consultant? Is it an analyst? Let's just call it a data scientist, and we'll figure it out later on. And that's my personal belief as to how the data scientist term came out. And then we created other terms like ML engineer, which tried to focus a little bit more on the operationalization side of things, but we never really defined very well. So, yeah, I mean, there's going to be the continued title proliferation, and data scientist doesn't sound as sexy as it did before. But what is an AI engineer other than a particular flavor of data scientist? The data scientist who has gone in and spent more time with getting LLMs to actually work. So some folks, especially former other industry analysts, have gone in and said, "Well, but you don't need data scientists. You don't need people to understand these. These are people aren't trained on these things. So why do you need a data scientist? Just go hire a developer, and the developer can go in and figure it out." Mm. And I have not seen that work. I've seen a lot of POCs that got created that way, but there's a whole lot more in creating a data-oriented product. And data scientists are usually the ones who've had to deal with that, who understand the nuances of that, of working with all the messy data sets from different locations, having to be very, what's the right term? Not opportunistic, agile, flexible when it comes to their methods, and trying out a whole host of different methods and working with the constraints of the data and the infrastructure and the technologies that they're using, and being iterative with a business partner who never really knows what it is that they want until they see it. And so, they're pretty well set up for it. That doesn't mean we couldn't do a better job training that role. And I think the training will be a little bit different, and it's going to be, for better or for worse, a lot less statistical rigor going into it.
All right. So that makes a lot of sense. So let's talk about, shift gears a little bit, and maybe another prediction, governance. I hear a lot about guardrails and governance. So, how do organizations really strike that balance between, governance or control and I'll say utility or innovation, whatever phrase you want to use?
Yes. And I mean, there's a strong connection to both of those. And there is certainly plenty of instances where governance has been the enemy of innovation. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't need to be that way. And I think there is a recognition that if we don't fix governance, we don't get very much on the innovation side. So this holds true if you're just new to governance. So think of folks who haven't been regulated before, folks in like retail or manufacturing. Or not regulated when it comes to data science and machine learning, that is, where they're realizing that the biggest barrier to innovation is getting this approved and adopted by the business. Mm-hmm. And in many cases, the business is very right in being skeptical of that these solutions are actually going to be reliable, that are being tested, that they're going to perform in the way that they're supposed to, because the organization does not have governance processes in place in order to go in and identify what those risks are, identify what the performance metrics are, go in and restrict access to sensitive data or expensive compute or risky libraries, and go and ensure rigorous testing, validation, auditability, and continuous improvement. So in instances where you didn't have governance, the lack of governance is a barrier to innovation with AI. And similarly, on the other side of the spectrum, there's highly regulated industries, financial services, insurance, pharmaceuticals, public sector. The existing governance designed around regulatory compliance is so heavy-handed, manual intensive, labor intensive, and slow that then that becomes its own blocker to innovation, mm-hmm. Both within the existing regulated use cases, but as we think about applying governance to the other use cases that aren't as risky, we just can't really, if we try and take those processes and apply those elsewhere, we're going to be even more of a pickle than we already are, and more delays than we already are. So I would say it's not that there is an innate tension between governance and innovation. It's a question of, it's not governance or no governance. It's good governance. It's effective governance. It's streamlined governance, and innovation. If you have bad governance, you're going to get risk and delays without any innovation. If you have good governance, you are able to drive more innovation and less risk. But that begs the question as to what good governance is, though. So we can delve into that if you.
Well,
if you like.
It's sort of like, maybe it's, I think there's some terms like adaptive governance, but it's appropriate governance for the right use case. But on the risk side of generative AI, I did some research yesterday, and I asked, look at some scientific papers. How often do these things hallucinate or confabulate and make up stuff? And the stats were between 2%, 8%, up to 15%, in some cases 60 to 80% of the time, depending on the domain. Can the risks ever really be eliminated or just reduced to an appropriate level for whatever risk tolerance the organization has? I don't think they can be completely removed, but I'd love your perspective on that.
Yeah, I mean, is it a bug or is it a feature? We appreciate these models because they can be creative, because they can fill in for the lack of direction and guidance that we are providing to them. It's a corollary to that since we haven't told it what it is that we wanted to do, that it will come up with things that we didn't tell it we wanted it to do. So as you say, there is no way that I'm aware of just taking something that's off the shelf and then removing all of those risk factors from it. But there's an incredible amount that you can do in order to minimize those risks. Sure. And above all, we as humans are terrible, right? I mean, we screw up all of the time. So the appropriate benchmark isn't, okay, well, can I get rid of all risk? It's can I get rid of, can I reduce risks to at least the level that I currently have, and ideally even further? And there, I'm trying to think of an instance where people haven't been able to do that. I think in every case, you can get it to be less risky than a person. The only thing is that you've got to do a lot of work in order to make sure that it's less risky as a person. And you got to remember, in most organizations, we do a lot of work to minimize the risk of us as humans. Like, again, thinking back to to outsourced customer service, so text messaging with chatbots and moving that from humans to Gen AI bots. When people are like, oh, but what happens if I ask the bot to give me 1,000% refund on what I bought?
Sure.
Or what happens when I just continuously ask for refunds every time I order something? Well, you can try and do that to a person, and if the person tries to do that, there's a business rules engine afterwards which prevents them from doing that and implementing that in their systems. So what is it that clever organizations who are using Gen AI chatbots for customer service automation are doing? Well, they're just reusing that same rules engine. They're just plugging into that. So the LLM has a very constrained set of options that it's allowed to choose from. If it tries to move beyond those ones and feed that into the rules engine to go in and execute on it, it is prevented from doing so. So there's already a whole lot of guardrails, so not guardrails in terms of
Sure.
built into the LLM, but guardrails around it that we have in our processes that we seem to forget exist, then that we wouldn't somehow, why wouldn't we think about doing those when we're using an LLM?
Well, that's an interesting perspective. I want to maybe poke at that a little bit. If we take like ML ops or just a standard predictive model, if you look at data or model drift, whatever term you want to use, it's pretty easy to understand if things are changing, right? We have a distribution and we can go look. And so there's a known method to do that. But when we're talking about creating text, images, audio, video, whatever at scale, is there any way to monitor that? Like what would be the approach to monitor something like that? I don't know if the math is there or how you would even do that. If you have this thing pumping out, hundreds of emails a day.
Yeah.
Can you ever truly monitor something like that at scale? Like, it's easy with numbers. I think it's harder with unstructured data.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you've hit the nail on the head in terms of both the opportunity and the challenge when it comes to generative AI. It's that we've moved from a realm of structured data to unstructured data. We have now this great tool at our disposal, both for analyzing unstructured data, as you say, text, voice, images, video, machine logs, combinations of all of structured data and unstructured data, you name it. We can now do at incredible scale with incredible ease, and we can now create that data with incredible ease. Now, there's a minor detail that since we haven't been doing that in the past, we don't really know how we should be going in and preventing that from measuring quality, preventing the creation of fraudulent fake data, making bad decisions around it. It does require, and what's the F1 score out of something like this when it's very difficult to know for certain, is this a false positive, false negative? What is a false positive or false negative on a college application essay, right?
Right.
I mean,
right.
Where do we begin with that? And so it's really on us to define what those performance metrics are. And it forces us to do what we should have always done on the structured data, traditional machine learning side, which was really to think about performance much more from the point of view of what the business needs versus the easy statistical methods that we had before. We're all hoping that AI would do the thinking for us, and instead it turns out, well, what is the most important thing to use artificial intelligence effectively? Well, it's more human intelligence around AI and around expertise. So you actually need your experts even more to go in and provide that guidance as to what are good answers, what are bad answers, and be involved in this on an ongoing basis and have tools for them so that they're not inundated with all false positives, for example. And you need a lot of human expertise when it comes to designing these experiences, designing these systems. Okay. So I wish there was an easy solution. There is a solution, but it's hard work. It's how do you evaluate performance of when a person is doing the job?
Good point. Good point. Okay, let's talk a little bit about AI agents. It's all over the place, and it's AI that acts on its own. And from what I've read, AI agents are the panacea of productivity, and they're going to automate everything. I'm not sure I buy that. So let's just start with, what are AI agents? In my head, I'm like, is this like the daemon in Linux, or is this something more involved than that?
Oh, it was much more than the daemon in Linux. It was the daemon in Linux who would figure out from you giving it like a very vague, high-level set of instructions, have an idea of roughly what you meant, iteratively try approaches to figure out what would work in order to accomplish it, check in with you occasionally, and then go and execute on it. And that was the original idea with agentic AI. So if you think a couple of years ago, they still exist, Baby AGI or Auto GPT. The paradigm is give one of these systems a pretty high level objective. Go in and dispute my parking ticket. Go in and figure out what's the best way I should, or email, do an email campaign in the best way possible for this product. Come up with use the LLM to come up with a structured approach to going and executing on this. Have it go in and connect your operational systems and test out those approaches and see whether they worked, and continuously improve on that, and then continue executing on that. That was the idea. So lots of autonomy, broad scope and objective, very little, sometimes some human in the loop, but very little in the way. And the multi-agent world is when you have these agents working with each other. So now I'll have one of these agents which, in a very anthropomorphized fashion, will think about legal compliance. Another one of these agents which will think about its approaches to going and emailing folks, and they will interact with each other. Oh, and maybe there'll be another agent there which will also help create brand-specific marketing content that it can then feed into these campaigns. And you'll have all of these different, very human-like agents, very autonomously functioning in tandem. I haven't.
It seems like a recipe for disaster, Kjell.
Yeah,
Sure.
it's sort of like, okay, would we? Are there any instances where I would go in and hire a bunch of high school valedictorians and put them in charge of my company, right? And say, do whatever you want, try it out, see what works, keep on iterating this until you succeed. Well, we don't do that with people. Why would we think we could do that in a highly emerging technology area?
Right.
So there's a one part is that it's very difficult to get these things to work, to get to some sort of good outcome and equilibrium in them. Another part is that organizationally, right, you've got barriers up the wazoo to going in and trying out any of these things. You have to have a domain, well, either an entirely simulated domain, entirely virtual domain. So like a simulation of everything you're doing. So maybe in manufacturing, where you can create a realistic enough simulation of your processes, you can do something like this. And it's very good for fraud. So if you don't care that it's going to get something wrong over and over again, and you don't mind going in and destroying your relationships with hundreds of thousands of folks, then sure, have at it. Okay. But there are very few areas where anybody, not only does it work, but where anybody would be willing to try it work for that conception of agentic AI.
Okay.
Instead, there is a different conception of it, which is this isn't a very narrow, broad objective function. I'm giving my generative AI based pipeline some very clear objectives, very clear actions it can take, defined parameters around what those actions are. And I'm bridging the gap to my operational systems so that it is actually executing on those actions. And if I define this pretty narrowly, there are all of these places in my processes which were either manual or they were automated but really bad, that I can now go in and plug these in. And the most obvious area is anything to do with document-based processes.
Sure.
Because these we now have these great tools for going in and analyzing unstructured content. Guess what? All those documents and files are unstructured content, and so we can now go in and automate all of these mini steps in those processes, and then take it to the next level and automate a lot of the tasks that we do as people that really shouldn't be done as people. They don't use our human intelligence. They're exactly the things that we hate doing as humans, whether they be that they're very manual, they're repetitive, they require looking at lots and lots of data from a lot of different sources, and making nebulous judgment calls around them. Or not even, the nebulous ones actually still require people, but ones where it's actually very prescribed. You don't need a whole lot of human intelligence to do it. You just need manual labor, sweat, attention, concentration, and how huge portions of what we do are things like that. Sure. That's the agentic AI that is working today. That's the agentic AI that is going in and having these conversations with customers of when their food is not showing up on time and automatically processing their rebates, but not if they've requested them too frequently.
Okay, so Kjell, what I'm hearing is we've got to have a very specific use case. And then with generative AI, I don't really have to write code anymore. It's like a prompt. Here's what I want it to do. So is that sort of kind of where we are today? I'm trying to understand what's happening today, and what's years away. What's your perspective on that?
Well, I actually don't know whether or not. At the end of the day, you could almost envision a world where you actually have to write more code, because there's so much code that you need to write around your LLM in order to get it to work effectively. And all of that is, you still need all of the control that you would have with code. And isn't the prompt, in some respects, just a more free form type of code? It certainly doesn't seem, a lot of prompt is certainly not human speech, in order, at least if you're trying to get it to work. So
you think there's going to be more code? I'm hearing then. So, and it's code maybe to manage the different Gen AI bots or agents that are within around your organization.
I think we need to split the way that we're interacting with LLMs as part of the experience we're doing in natural language. The way that we are constructing Gen AI solutions is in code, and then something which certainly doesn't look like natural language. It's more that the weird and arcane world of prompts. So yes, the LLMs have made it possible to interact with them in human language in a new way, but it's forcing us to develop new language. It's a little bit like when we're going to Google, we're not going in and writing out the same kind of sentences as we would write in a text or in an email. We are using Google speak.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense.
And we're forced to learn a much richer, strange vocabulary around this. And occasionally it'll understand what it is that we're asking to do. But separate the language of engaging with an LLM for the language used to go in and create your Gen AI applications. I'm not sure it's necessarily going to be more code. To be honest, I think it's still being figured out whether or not we can abstract away more of this. But right now, the surprising thing is just how much incredible amounts of code that you need to actually write in order to get these things to work.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. All right, I think we have time for maybe one more question, and we'll stay on the AI agent theme. And I'm wondering about risks, and how does this change the nature of AI governance, which we spoke about earlier.
Yes. It's a great question. It's one that is still being worked out. I think, especially when I talk to model risk management teams in finance, this is like their number one question is, how do we go from what we're currently doing today for our credit risk scoring models and go in and apply something vaguely similar governance-wise to our generative AI-based projects? Mm-hmm. And my recommendation there is to go through and decompose the activities that you're doing as part for governance that follow that life cycle of development and deployment. And when you start doing that, you find that those activities are similar in terms of what they're trying to achieve. At the beginning of projects, what are you trying to do? You're going through and identifying risks. You're identifying risk metrics. You're identifying the stakeholders who can provide input on risk. You're creating risk mitigation plans. You are documenting all of these. You're getting appropriate approvals. Now, do those individual things look different for a predictive AI model analyzing structured data than a Gen AI based one? They do. But the steps are what you're trying to achieve is similar. Or the second step in this, data and infrastructure, environment access. Mm-hmm. Those are, yes, they're different sources of data, but you still need to go through and identify, well, what are the risks in accessing these different types of data and writing to these types of data and using this infrastructure and using these third-party expensive models. Or then on the ongoing basis, as the project progresses through development and deployment, ongoing monitoring of how is the project evolving relative to my stated risk metrics and performance metrics, mm-hmm. Going in and managing the process of remediating those risks as they come up and ensuring that they're remediated and that they have been signed off on. Or when these are going into deployment, that these things have gone through rigorous broad testing, that they are auditable and reproducible so that you can undertake a continuous improvement. Those steps that you're taking and the foundational capabilities that you need in order to do those are very similar between what you do for Gen AI versus not. So if you take this bottoms up approach to AI governance and think about what it is that you're trying to achieve what you want to do to govern the development and deployment, there's a lot of similarity and there's a lot that we can build on. The problem is that a lot of folks are going the opposite top-down route and saying, okay, well, let's start by creating an AI governance council. Let's start with our principles, mm-hmm. and our governance framework. Let's do an audit. And those aren't inherently bad things. Those are good things to do.
Sure.
But you run into this big cliff where it's like, okay, and now what? We've done these things, but we haven't really changed what's happening on the ground. We haven't changed behavior. So what have we done? We've spent like six months to a year doing this, and we don't have a whole lot to show for it. And then the willingness to go in and continue this effort peters out. And you don't want to be in that situation. You need to be in some kind of virtuous cycle of, okay, we can improve governance, improve trust. We got things into production faster, and that helps us invest more in our governance capabilities and to do this even better, more rigorously, more in a more streamlined fashion.
Okay, well, there's a lot to think about for organizations, and I guess maybe to wrap things up, Kjell, there's this field is just moving so fast. There's new things out every day. For the technology leaders out there, what advice would you have for them to, how can they perhaps get started?
Yes.
What would you recommend to them?
Well, it would be move fast, but make sure you're moving in the right direction.
Walk with purpose.
walk with purpose. And a lot of this is leadership. A lot of this is, it's not going to happen on its own. That direction is not going to happen on its own. There's a lot of well-intentioned belief that let's encourage broad-based experimentation. Let's put this in the hands of everybody and they will figure it out. And there's not a lot of evidence for that working, versus let me go in and find the individuals that are already in my organization who have the experience, who've been working around this. They haven't been making the sexiest, broadest claims because they know better than to do that. But they have been working towards existing machine learning and predictive AI use cases already. See what they're doing, empower them, maybe up-level them, move them into leadership positions. If you don't have them, hire folks externally who have those kinds of experience delivering business value with AI machine learning, and give them the mandate support, funding to go in and build up those capabilities, create a roadmap and a portfolio of successful use cases, and really spark that virtuous cycle. But it requires leadership. And you don't have to be to spark this. If you're a chief data analytics officer or a CIO or a CEO, you don't have to be the AI expert yourself. You just need to be going in and hiring those people, promoting those people, supporting those people, being involved, making sure that they are aligned to value and that they are delivering, and holding them accountable to do so. And if you do that long enough, you will actually become an AI expert, at least a leader, an AI leader, in the process of doing so.
Okay, well, amazing. Well, thank you for that advice, Kjell. And this has been a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. I want to thank you for joining, and I think our listeners are going to learn a lot from that. So appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Anytime.
All right. Cheers. Bye.